onto the U.S. men's national team squad for these final two tune-up games before the World Cup. The first thing I want to say here, whether you agree with Gregg Berhalter's approach or think it is the stupidest thing you've ever heard, you at least have to give him credit for having a vision, knowing what he wants, and sticking with it. There is logical reasoning behind the decisions he is making. Again, you may disagree, but all you can ask for is that there is a why. It's one of my big things in life. Defining the why. Because I feel like so often people just kind of do things without thinking, and decisions are made without looking at the bigger picture and having a real intentional purpose behind it. Gregg Berhalter knows exactly what he is doing and what he wants. I don't entirely agree with it, but it is very clear he has a plan and he is going to stick to that plan. And that's what made this roster really interesting, is because of sort of the way the schedules have played out, the limited games leading up to this World Cup. I feel like this is the first opportunity, and also the final opportunity, he had to sort of change direction and open his pool back up to include some guys who 5, 6, 12 months ago would not have been in the picture. Specifically looking at you, Brandon Vasquez, Tim Ream, for example, Jordy Mahalovich. We'll talk about more about him in a little while. Right, there are some guys who haven't really got an opportunity with this group. And they could have been included in this roster. Whether they were going to make the World Cup squad or not, having them in here in place of some sort of tried and true veterans who you know what you're going to get out of, and then you evaluate, you see how they do in camp, and then make your final decisions for the roster. But Gregg Berhalter didn't do that. He knows what he wants in his strikers, he knows what he wants in his center backs, and that is what he is sticking with. So a couple key takeaways I had from what Gregg Berhalter actually said when speaking to the media and explaining this roster. Number one, he said on multiple occasions, this roster is not set. And I believe him. Do not assume that because somebody is included on this, that means they are essentially a lock to go to Qatar. Now, I also believe, and Gregg Berhalter essentially said as much, that 80% of the roster is decided at this point, barring some sort of incredible change or unfortunate injury in the next couple months. And you also have, Jedi Robinson, Tim Moya, who are missing out on this through injury, who are going to be on that roster, assuming they're available. So that is part of it, is don't put too much stock in the players that were chosen and the players that weren't. Second, John Brooks is not making this team. Gregg Berhalter went on a list in his opening statement of sort of the other guys he was really considering. He listed 5 center backs not included in this camp and did not mention John Brooks. Now, Tim Ream was one of those players who was mentioned, which goes back to the center back point and Gregg Berhalter knowing what he wants. He said, the things we ask our center backs to do are not Tim Ream's strengths. And then he said, Tim Ream's playing great. He's captaining a team that's playing well in the Premier League. He does have a lot to offer. He reads the game really well. There are certainly skills he has. But Gregg Berhalter wants to press high and he wants to leave space behind his center backs, and that is not Tim Ream. And it is also not John Brooks. So that was one interesting thing that kind of might have flown under the radar about all this is, and maybe Berhalter just forgot him. I find that hard to believe. He had specific points he was making about all these guys he didn't call into this camp. And he didn't talk about John Brooks one bit. So I think we can put that one to bed. My other takeaway, Jordan Pefok has a chance to make this roster and actually go to the World Cup. Brandon Vasquez doesn't. what Berhalter said about PFOC was really interesting to me. He said, we feel like we know exactly what Jordan offers. We didn't need to see him again. And then somebody asked about the decision to bring Ricardo Pepe and sort of said, is part of the thought process to give him a bit of confidence and try and get him going again with the struggles he's had club-wise. Now he's got his loan to the Eredivisie. He should be playing consistently. It's looking good so far. And Gregg Berhalter said, yes, that was part of the thought process was he played an important role during qualifying. He had the struggles in the Bundesliga. So we wanted to give him this opportunity to kind of get rolling again now that he's got a better club situation. And so I put those two things together and said, I do think there's a chance, and combining those two things also with Gregg Berhalter's insistence, this roster is not set. And I took all of that to mean Jordan PFOC has a real chance. Jordan PFOC is not Gregg Berhalter's preferred style of striker. And it's fair to bring Josh Sargent after the form he's been in. He scored another goal today. But I see a world in which Berhalter ends up choosing two of Jesus Ferreira, who's going to go, Pepe and Sargent, and brings PFOC as a third option, probably not as a starter in any of the games, but something different off the bench, a physical presence, right? Just a different type of striker, because I would be a little bit wary of bringing three guys who are more or less the same player. So I absolutely see a world in which that happens. But Berhalter likes Ricardo Pepe. And he loves Jesus Ferreira, and rightfully so. I expect Ferreira to be the starter on this team based on what Berhalter was saying today. But again, plenty can change in the next couple months here. Those were the big things I took away from Berhalter's discussion and his explanation as to kind of why this roster is the way it is, why these players got left out, why these players were included. The other couple thoughts I want to throw out there that are just mine about this team. Of the players who did make it, I'm really excited to see what Sam Vines can do without Jedi Robinson being available. Sam Vines has been playing phenomenally. He is a left-footed left back. The U.S. doesn't have any of those outside of Jedi Robinson. And Gregg Berhalter even said, yeah, we looked at it, and we decided the best option was to just bring a bunch of right-footers who can play on the left side, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. But Serginho Dest, Joe Scally are both guys who could, and I fully expect one of them is going to be playing on the left side at some point in these two games. There is no third left-footed left-back option, which makes Sam Vines a very, very interesting question and sort of person to throw into this conversation about the final squad. Because Jedi Robinson's going to be the starter. But there is kind of this trickle-down effect depending on whether Sam Vines makes this team or not. Because if he does, and you have Serginho Dest, that probably means Joe Scally's a no, because you've still got Shaq Moore, DeAndre Yedlin, and Reggie Cannon who can play on the right. And then you have two guys who can play on the left, plus Serginho Dest, who's also capable of playing on that side. If Sam Vines doesn't perform so well, one of those right backs might be sacrificed to bring Joe Scally, so you have Robinson, Dest, and Scally who can play on the left. That's just me speculating, throwing that out there, but it is a position I am concerned about, that backup left back spot. And Sam Vines is a guy who hasn't really gotten a chance with this group of players against high-level competition to prove himself. I am looking forward to seeing what he's got, and hopefully he plays well. Club form, he's been terrific, and he slots right in there as a guy you feel comfortable with playing in an emergency if for some reason Jedi Robinson can't go. Other couple things in terms of guys who got left off. Jordy Mahalovich was not part of the conversation in the press conference. I will continue to go to bat for him. And I am somewhat frustrated by this. Simply because, and this is the one issue I have with Berhalter's logic. Okay, I get the idea of we don't need to see Jordan Peacock again. We understand what he is. We'll make our decision about whether we want that to be part of the team going to Qatar or not. I got no issue with that whatsoever. But if you're going to dismiss Peacock for that reason, do you need to see Paul Arriola again? I'm not picking on him in particular. I'm just throwing a name out there. And it's a little bit more difficult for Brandon Vasquez, who is the other guy I really wanted to see on this roster. Because Josh Sargent hasn't been in the picture for a while. Ricardo Pepe hasn't been in the picture for a while. And there's a real chance Ricardo Pepe ends up being that second guy. And so there is real value to bringing him into this squad. I see what Berhalter is doing there. I have no issue with the even though I would pick Peacock and have him on my team going to Qatar. I have no issue with Berhalter saying, for this window, I want to see Pepe again. I want to get him back into the swing of things. So it's just difficult because you have two guys at the striker position who Berhalter wants to see that haven't been around for a little while, which makes it much more difficult to then find a spot for Brandon Vasquez because they were never going to bring four strikers. And you're not going to leave Jesus Ferreira off this team. Where you had more flexibility was in the midfield and on the wing. You got Malik Tillman in there. You got Paul Arriola in there. Seen some people frustrated. Jordan Morris is in there. I'm pro Jordan Morris. So that's not where I would have gone. But I would have loved. I just don't understand what happened from Jordy Mahalovich getting called into the camp he missed because he had to pull out of because of injury. And now, to make him not part of this conversation. The explanation I can come up with that would be consistent, and it applies to Brandon Vasquez as well, is that Berhalter is putting an incredible value on the group he has seen and sort of his ability to understand what they offer and their ability to understand what he wants from them. Right? If you look at this squad, the guys who got left out are the guys who haven't gotten in. You can have your own opinion about whether that's right or wrong. But that is what happened here. I probably would have done things a little bit differently. But at the end, there is a logical series of thoughts you can have and a logical explanation you can come to about why this all played out the way it did. And if you're a U.S. men's national team fan, you have to feel good about that. There is a plan. Berhalter knows what he wants. And at the end of the day, that's all you can really ask for. So we'll see what this team does. We'll see how they line up. Who gets the opportunities at left back? Who gets the opportunities at striker? What these guys look like. And I will say one more time, I really believe Gregg Berhalter when he says this team is not set in stone. And it's not just because players may get injured and he doesn't have everybody available for this camp. I still firmly believe the last 3 or 4 spots on this team are up for grabs. One of the goalkeeper spots, and also it's the impression I got from what Berhalter said was the decision was, let's get Zach Steffen healthy, where he's just starting to sort of work his way back. So there's no need to, and again, he's a guy, you know exactly what you're getting for better or worse. So there was no need to bring him into this camp. So that's another, right? You're picking the goalkeeper, at least one of the final goalkeepers, potentially one of the center back spots, one of the striker spots, the last 1 or 2 winger / midfield spots, however you want to categorize them, between your Jordan Morris's, your Christian Roldans, your Paul Arriolas, that group of guys. So there still are some spots up for grabs. I really, really do believe that. We'll see how it plays out. But that is what I took away from what Gregg Berhalter said and sort of my thoughts on some of the players who got excluded.